Hey, how is it going? I'm Chris from 99scloud.com. This video is a part of a series that brings you from zero to hero building an AWS HTTP REST API with a React Web Frontend. In the previous part, we have done some styling, added missing buttons, and added a global state. This tutorial is a continuation of the previous part, so if you haven't seen it yet, you can find the full playlist in the comment section below this video. In this part, we will create the AddNote and UpdateNote pages and create the functionality to delete the note. So if you are interested, stay tuned. Hey and welcome back. In this video, we will be creating the AddNote and UpdateNote pages and also add the functionality to delete a note. Let's have a look at the agenda. First, we will be creating the AddNote page and form. Then we will be creating the UpdateNote page and form. And then we will be adding the functionality to delete the note. There are also some prerequisites. You will need Node.js installed. You will also need Visual Studio Code installed if you want to follow along this tutorial. And as this is a series, you will have to have seen the previous videos. So if you haven't, then there will be a link in the comment section below where you can find all the previous videos. And by the way, if you like this video, then I'd appreciate if you could give me a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. So without further ado, let's get right started. In this next step, we will be going to create the AddNote form so that we can add a new note. So let's head over to the AddNote.jsx file, and in here we can import useForm from React Hook Form. So the React Hook Form library will help us to create our form. So let's add this hook. So we can say const handle submit and control equals useForm. So handle submit will be responsible for submitting the form state, and the control is responsible of controlling our form. As we are using the material UI for our form fields, we will need this control to control the material UI form fields. We will see a little bit later how this looks like exactly. So let's create the layout first. So we will go into the HTML section here, and then we will be starting to add the layout. So here we will just define a box, sx equals padding 1 AM. And then inside here we will define our form. So we will have form on submit equals handle submit. And handle submit will have a function. And we will pass the data, and then here we will say save data. Okay. So up here we will create a save data function, const save data equals async data and then what's inside it. So this is just a different way basically to create the function where we just have the function in this variable save data here. And we will need to use async again because we will connect with Axios, which is an asynchronous function, to save our node. But let's continue with the form and finish this. Here we will just say stack spacing equals 2. So each of the form fields that we add in this tag will just be separated by a spacing of 2. So this is what this basically does. Okay, let's add the imports for Material UI. So up here we can type import box stack add UI/material, save. So we got rid of these errors down here, which is good. And then we can also add the controller, which is a function from React hook form. Controller. Okay, so let's add the controller down here. Controller. So what this controller does is control our form field from Material UI. So let's see how this looks like. So this controller will have a name, which we will say it's node. Then we will have a control equals control. Then we will have a default value which is empty because our node text field should not contain any default value. So what we are basically creating here is a text field in which we can enter our node. And then we will say render equals, and this will be some code. And then in here we will define a function. And then here we will define the field. So we will just say field on change value and field state error. Okay, that looks good. And then down here we will enter the text field. So here we will just type text field. And in this text field we will have a label. So this is now the text field from Material UI. So up here we will need to define the text field. Okay, and then down here the label that we want to use is node. Then the variant will be outlined. So that's the text fields that will be outlined. Then we have the value which will be empty. Then we will have an onChange handler. So onChange equals onChange. So this will be executed when the value is changing. Then we have an error handler. And then we will have a helper text equals error.message null. So if there is an error, then we will output the error message, and otherwise we will not output anything. So that's basically what we say here. And with this we have defined the text field itself. So this is all Material UI code for this text field. So if you want to look at the details of what all these things do, then I'd suggest you just read through the Material UI documentation. I'll not go into the details of all of this, but if you would want that I do a tutorial on Material UI as well, then just let me know in the comment section below, and then I might pick it up once I have some additional time. Okay, and then down here we will define a rule. Required node is required. Okay, so here we just do some validation, which means that an input is required. So if the field is empty, then there will be an output node is required. And then we will need an additional component, which will be a button component. Button type equals submit. Variant equals contained. Size will be large. And the button text will be create node. Okay, we will need to import this button as well from Material UI button. We didn't get an error. So let's have a look what happens. Let's just get an output here. So we just say console.log data. And then we will go into the browser and we will go back here. And then if we click on to create, then you will see that we now have this node text field and the create node button. So when we click on it, then you see that it gets red and it will tell that the node is required. And if we type in a node, so this somehow I cannot type anything into the field. Let's see what's wrong here. Value has to be value, which is this value that is passed up here. So let's go back and try this again. Yeah, now it seems to work. So here we can just say test node. And if we click create, then as you can see, we have this output node, test node. And that's coming from this text field. Okay, so now we can add the functionality for our save data to save this node. So what we will do here is we will say const node post endpoint equals config data.aws REST endpoint plus /node. Okay, then what we will need to do is we will need to import our config data. So we can just say import config data from config data.json. Okay, no errors, so this is good. So we have defined the URL for our endpoint. And then in here, we can now execute the Axios function. So we will just say await Axios.post node post endpoint. And we will add our node. So node will be data.node. So when we go back to the browser, that's what we have here. Node is test node, and this is passed through this data variable. Save. Axios is not defined, so we will have to import Axios. So here we can just say import Axios from Axios. The spaces to make the code a little bit better readable. Save. This removed this error, and then once the node is saved, we want to navigate back to the nodes page where we have all the nodes. So we want to navigate back to list nodes. In order to do that, we will have to import useNavigate again. So we will add another import useNavigate from React Router DOM, and down here we will just say const navigate equals to useNavigate, and then in here we can say navigate to /nodes. That should be it. Okay, so this should conclude the AddNote form. So let's see if this is working. So let's go back into the browser. Then we can type a note in here. We will just say this is a note passed through the form. And we can click on to create. This has navigated us back to the nodes page, as you can see. And we have the output here as well. So this is a node passed through the form. Okay, so this means our AddNote form is working correctly. We have now added the AddNote form, so we can start building the UpdateNote form. The UpdateNote form will be very similar to the AddNote form. So as we have the same form field, we want to create a component that we can actually reuse. In order to do that, we will go into Visual Studio Code, and here in the Notes component, we will create a new file, and we will call this file noteFormFields.jsx. Okay, then we will just type RFC. And what we can do now is we can just go onto this AddNote.jsx, and then we will copy this controller into the node form field. So here we can just remove this and then add this. Format document. Okay. And now we will have to do a few small modifications. Well, first we will need to add the import. So we will import the controller from React hook form, and we will also import the text field from UI/material. Okay. And then we will pass some variables. The first one will be the control, and the other one will be the value. And by default, the value will be nothing. Here we will need to adjust this. So we pass the control into here. So this is fine. And then for the default value, we will pass in the value, because when we add a new node, then the text field value will be empty by default, and we will enter a new node into the text field. But when we want to update the node, Then we want to have the current node displayed so that we can edit it and then save it. And then this default value won't be empty. It will contain the current nodes that we want to edit. So let's go back to the AddNote function, and here we can just remove this controller and we can add in the node form field. So we can just import it. So here we will just say import node form field from /node form field. And then we will add it here. So we'll just type node form field like this. And in here we will just pass the control. Control equals control. Save. And then we don't need the controller up here anymore. And we also don't need the text field from here anymore. And we still need the button. That's good. Save. Okay, that should be it. So when we go back onto here and we click onto create, we see that the node is still appearing. And if I add a node, a second node passed through the form and I create it, a second node passed through the form. So you see that this is also correctly added, which means that our component, our node form fields component, is working. And here we didn't pass any value because the node form field is empty by default. But when we do the same in the update method, then we will need to define the value. So let's do that now. Let's go to the UpdateNote component and let's add the form here. So what we can do is we can just go back to the AddNote and just copy this and paste this in here. Here we will just change this to update data and then we will add a new function up here. I will just copy it also over from here as it's pretty similar, and I think I can copy everything from up here and just add it into here. And we will just put this here. Here we will call this update data. This will be our node put endpoint. We will change that down here as well. And here we will additionally add the node state.id.s. Okay. Then here we will have the put method, which is executed. The node will also be data.node, and we will navigate back to /node. So this basically stays the same. And then further down here, additionally to this control, we will pass in the value, which is the value of the current node. Value equals node state.node.s, and this button will be called update node. And then it says we need to add all these imports. Let's go back to the AddNote function and we will just import all from here to here. Save. Let's see if this worked. Okay, this all looks fine. So let's go over to here. Then we click on to update. And as we can see, the node text field is now pre-populated with the current node. This is a node passed through the form, and we will just add a 2 here. And then we can click on to update node. And here we can see this is a node passed through form and with this 2 here, which means that our update node function is working correctly as well. Okay, what's missing is this delete function. So let's do this next. Okay, so let's add our delete functionality. Let's go back into Visual Studio Code. And in here we can go into the lists nodes page. And then if we scroll a little bit further down, then we have this delete node method already defined. And here we have already added it. Oh no, we still need to add it to this onClick handler. So here we will just say delete node. And we will also pass in the node. Then we will go back up to our delete node function. And here we will also pass in the node. And then we can define the URL, which is const node delete endpoint equals config data.aws REST endpoint plus /node/ and then plus node.id.s. Okay, that's the URL. Then next we will create our Axios functionality. So we will say, oh, and this will need to be an async function because we use Axios. So async function. And then down here we will just say await Axios.delete node delete endpoint. And once the node has been deleted, then we want to fetch the nodes again. So refresh the nodes, and here what we will want to do as well is we want to put this into a try catch block. Try catch error. And if there is an error, we just console.log the error, and otherwise we will add this. Okay, good, and that should be it. So we connect to the REST API, we delete the node, and once the node is deleted, which we do with this await. So with this await, we wait until the node is actually deleted, and then we will fetch all the nodes again. So let's go back to the home page, and here we will delete, this is node number 2, so we just click on it, and bam, it's gone. As you can see, it has reloaded, and this node is not available anymore. Okay, and with this we have also added the delete node function. So with this we have created a React Web Frontend with which we can create, update, delete and list all our nodes. One thing you might have noticed is that the nodes are not sorted in the sort order by the creation date. And that's an unfortunate limitation of the scan functionality. So if you use the scan command, you are not able to actually guarantee any sort order. In this tutorial, I will not go into the details of that. So if you need a sorted order, then you would have to read through the documentation. But if you have issues, then let me know in the comment section below. Then I might also create a tutorial on that. With this, we come to the end of this tutorial. I hope it helped you to understand the basics of how to create a React web application connecting to an AWS API backend. I know from own experience that it's not easy to grasp all these concepts. That's why I try to keep my tutorials basic and sometimes maybe explain in too much detail what I do. But I hope that especially for beginners, these types of tutorials are valuable. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate if you could give it a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. You can also check out the comment section, which has links to Github repositories and to written tutorials on 99scloud.com. Have a good one and see you in the next video.